Hey everyone, with Imaginarium Theater's official release as Genshin's new endgame mode, there has been a lot of contrary opinions about whether or not this game mode is good or not. People think it's too hard, too easy, too restrictive, etc. As a day 1 free-to-play player that has been patiently waiting for any new additions to endgame in Genshin, I went into it excited. And after completing the game mode a couple of times, I've come to the conclusion that Imaginarium Theater has some baseline systems that make combat somewhat unique, but it heavily fails in execution as endgame content. Before I elaborate on my impressions, I first wanted to quickly explain everything you need to know about this game mode. Ultimately, it's very simple. Imaginarium Theater has a monthly reset and contains up to 8 combat stages. Stages 3, 6, and 8 are just bosses, while the rest are just kill enemies or defend the monolith. To get all of the rewards from the game mode, both the seasonal one and the first time clear one, you just need to complete all 8 stages. To actually play all these 8 stages, you must play hard mode. Compared to the other difficulties, hard mode has higher level enemies and requires you to field a total of 18 characters. The characters that you can choose are element restricted. In this season, you can only play Electro, Pyro, and Anemo units. Of course, this will change as the next one is looking to be Hydro, Cryo, and Anemo. 6 out of the 8 characters are fixed and chosen by Hoyoverse. You have to start with these 6 characters, and if you don't own them, you can use the trial versions. These characters have a 20% increase to their HP, defense, and attack, not just in this game mode, but the entire game, including Abyss. For the remaining characters, you have to choose from your roster of the restricted elements. Some of your chosen units can bypass this element restriction if you happen to have these special guest stars. So in this example, I can choose to use Baiju and Alhaitham since I own them. Lastly, one of the characters can be borrowed from your friend, which can be extremely helpful if they have a powerful character. Before each stage, you can see that you have some Fantasia flowers, and you can use these Fantasia flowers to spend on buffs or adding more of the characters from your chosen roster to use in team building. Then you can choose your combat stage. Each of these has different types of enemies, so you can choose the one easier for the characters that you have available. There are also harder stage versions that just give more Fantasia flowers. If you don't like any of the options, you can just reroll on the bottom right. Starting each combat stage, you can see that you can choose from a specific roster, and once you start, you choose from the 6 characters that everyone must use. For each stage, you must field a party of 4 in order to start combat. In addition, each character has an energy system. You can only use each character twice before you can't use them anymore. There are some stage effects that you can see, but the important part is the performance goals, which are basically the clear requirements. There are a total of 3, but the only relevant one in terms of getting rewards is the first one, which is, for this one, says defeat all opponents. The second one only gives extra Fantasia flowers for you to buy more buffs or characters that you can use, while the third one is just an extra time limit that gives a star when completed, and this star is just for flexing and aesthetic purposes. And as you can see, after completing the stage, then you get all your Fantasia flowers if you completed the requirements. Like I said again, the first one is the only one that matters in terms of getting the rewards, and after completing each stage, you get 1 character from the remaining 12 that you initially chose for you to use in your team building. And that's pretty much it. You repeat this process until you're done. Clear all 8 stages and you get all the rewards. The one unique reward are these toy medals, which you can use in Wolfie's shop to buy thespian tricks, which are special poses for characters which you can use when taking photos. Now, to explain my thoughts on Imaginarium Theater, I want to discuss this game mode's 3 main points of contention: character restriction, RNG, and overall difficulty of the game mode. I think the elemental restriction in itself isn't that bad of an idea. The concept forces you to use unconventional team comps and characters you may not normally play, which I think is a breath of fresh air for combat content. The biggest issue with restriction in Imaginarium Theater is accessibility. Needing 12 additional characters of the required elements, all of which at minimum need to be leveled, is a pretty big barrier just to play the complete version of the game mode. Yes, the large requirement is designed for endgamers and is supposed to incentivize you to build more characters, but it doesn't really feel good when, for instance, you can only access easy mode and clear 3 out of the 8 available stages if you just don't have enough characters. And it's not like the remaining 5 stages are drastically different. All of the stages are practically the same. As a result, this large requirement just feels like some artificial barrier of difficulty, when in reality it only serves to lock players out of playing the content. They could have easily had all 3 difficulties contain all 8 stages, so players with different levels of investment can actually play the content in full, with the barrier being a player being unable to clear a difficulty level because of less invested characters. Next is RNG in the game mode. Personally, I think RNG as a concept is fine. The idea of getting random buffs and characters makes each run different, and getting different characters brings the challenge of trying to figure out the best team comp or character combo to clear a specific stage. And I think that the problem solving of proper team building with a random hodgepodge of characters is the most interesting thing to come out of this game mode. However, these concepts are great in theory, but in practice, when playing the actual Imaginarium Theater, these ideas do not play out, and the biggest reason for that is the actual difficulty of the game mode. Imaginarium Theater only has 2 difficulties in terms of clearing the whole game mode. You either can't clear because you don't have enough characters to access hard mode, or you don't have enough characters built, or the game mode is extremely easy because you have some characters built and can actually access the game mode. There isn't really any in-between difficulty, it is just an account investment check. Yes, I understand that as a day 1 player, this should be easy for me since I have a ton of built characters, so you could argue that my perspective is skewed. But for my clears, I intentionally use all the trial characters provided, and we all know that the trial characters have really bad stats, as well as I filled up my roster with a ton of my weaker Pyro, Electro, and Anima units. And aside from 1 or 2 resets, this game mode provided no challenge for me, and I was still able to get all 8 stars. And remember, the stars are useless for the rewards, so I could have had an even easier time if I just ignored them. And the reason I think it's balanced this way is the restriction and RNG aspects inherent in this game mode. Because we are unable to make proper teams, Hoyoverse can't realistically make the enemies as hard as Abyss 12, because without proper team building, it's very likely that people wouldn't clear because our teams wouldn't make any sense, they wouldn't do as much damage, and if the enemies were as tough as Abyss 12, they would still be alive. But with the current combat difficulty of Imaginarium Theater, it seems too far in the opposite direction. If I view Imaginarium Theater as an upgraded, expanded, permanent version of a combat event, which it really is since we've had Triumphant Frenzy, which has the same character stamina system, we can only use characters twice, then I think this content is pretty good. It contains a unique way of combat via random team building while also allowing players to try different characters in more realistic scenarios, which kinda is the true purpose of this game mode since Hoyoverse always wants people to pull for specific characters. However, I can't just view this game mode with a casual mindset as just an event because it is clearly designed for endgame players, with the hard mode having a 18 total character requirement. Aside from this artificial restriction, however, nothing in this game mode makes it feel like hardcore endgame for veteran players. The gameplay is just simply too easy, enemies are too weak, and the requirements of each stage are just too simple for endgame players. And because of this low difficulty, the entire system of Imaginarium Theater falls apart. The entire point of this game mode is horizontal investment of your account where you build more characters to use, and while building more characters does make this game mode a bit easier, it is hardly a necessity. All you really need to complete each stage is one strong DPS character, or a 2 character combo such as some sub DPSs. Thus, even though you need a total of 18 characters play while 6 of them are already given to you, so you need 12 additional characters, you can easily clear all the stages with 4 to 8 properly built characters as long as you can space them out correctly, with the other characters just being leveled enough but just acting as bench warmers in your party. And remember, I used the trial characters and they were perfectly fine as my main DPS as long as I had maybe other characters in the team such as like Fischl and stuff that were leveled and built correctly. In addition, remember that one of these units you can borrow from a friend, so you can just find a C1 or over Arlecchino to easily clear 2 stages for you by herself, for instance. Because of this, I wouldn't recommend anyone to go out of their way to properly build additional characters purely for Imaginarium Theater. The low combat difficulty of Imaginarium Theater makes the systems pretty worthless. The buffs you can buy aren't very impactful and aren't needed to clear any stages. Since you can easily clear a stage with 1 or 2 strong characters in a team, the concept of building a proper team with some random characters is completely thrown out the window, as you can just put 2 to 3 random units, never switch to them, and just stick to your strongest carries and you can still easily clear. As a result, instead of the ideal scenario where you have to make the best out of your units and actually come up with some unique team building that still works, in reality, the best strategy is to just spend all your Fantasia flowers on adding more characters to your roster so you can actually fill your team where they may not be even used. And you do this just to spread the use and save the stamina for your best characters. Thus, Imaginarium Theater completely fails as an endgame system for which it was designed for, making it feel more like an event than actual endgame content. While I did have some fun playing through Imaginarium Theater, and I'm happy that at least we finally got something in terms of permanent combat gameplay after 3+ years, this game mode completely fails to serve as proper endgame content for the more veteran and hardcore players, which it was clearly designed for. Its existence can even be considered a detriment to the amount of endgame content that Genshin has, as the Abyss now changes less often than before now. If I were to make some changes to this game mode, I would of course make the enemies more difficult to clear, thus making the game mode harder. It needs to be harder if the game mode is supposed to be for endgame players. To balance the difficulty out, I would either decrease the amount of characters needed deviate slightly, or allow maybe like 4 characters of the roster to be the other 4 elements that aren't listed. This would ease the character restriction and allow for more proper team building since you have more access to the other elements. At the current moment, the other elements other than the 3 that you're supposed to use are just like specific guest characters, the 4 specific guest characters. But if you allow to use any of those elements, like any Hydro character, then you have more freedom in team building. Of course, maybe just allow 1 or 2 Hydro characters in this example, so you can't just freely create any team that you want. A little bit of restriction I think is good to just have more creativity and force some uncomfortable team building. Also, instead of everyone starting stage 1 with the exact same 6 characters, I would just make it completely random, but also give you more characters to start out with, maybe 8 or 10 instead of the 6 that we have, to give you more options and the ability to plan better. I would also definitely allow less than 4 unit teams to better reward more vertically invested players and provide more strategy in spending the stamina of your units. After every stage, instead of allowing you to buy characters, I would just make it so that you can only get buffs, and the buffs being better, making them more impactful in helping you clear the stages. Those are just some of my spitball ideas though. They may be good or very bad in practice, but I do think that some of these ideas could solve some of the game mode's issues. In many ways, Imaginarium Theater has a sort of identity crisis. The large character restrictions scream hardcore endgame content where accounts need to build multiple characters, but the actual difficulty of the game mode, as well as Hoyoverse's intent for the game mode to allow players to try out trial characters so that people can pull them, make it seem like it was designed for more casual players. It really feels like Hoyoverse is trying to cater to both sides at once, and in doing so, failed to fully satisfy both sides. Of course, in my biased perspective, Hoyoverse should just lean toward the hardcore side and just increase the difficulty. But I guess we'll have to see where Hoyoverse takes Imaginarium Theater in the future. I truly do believe that because of its base systems, this game mode does have the potential to be good, engaging endgame content. But as it is right now, I think a lot of changes need to be done for this to happen, and whether or not it will happen, I don't know. We'll just have to see. And that's all I had to talk about. I would love to hear your opinions on this game mode, whether you disagree or agree with my takes. Feel free to leave your thoughts in the comments, and of course, like and subscribe if you enjoyed this discussion, and I hope you all have a wonderful day.